How's it going, big shooters, heavy hitters, and long steppers? This is a Dudecool. This is a short one this time. Dudecool short. So this time I'm going to be talking about, what should I talk about? How about something that came up one time when I was on a run running with some friends, and we talked about this, and I think my position on this might be a little bit on the controversial side, but I'll explain it, and you either agree with it or you don't. So my position, so the talk was about optimism versus pessimism, and my side was that pessimism can actually be more useful than optimism in certain situations. And so my reason for saying this is, so imagine that you're in kind of like a bad situation, right? So if you're optimist, you might think, things will get better, things will be fine. Well, it's a nice feeling, but the downside of that feeling is, what if that feeling causes you to not make any changes in your life? What if you're just like, things will get better, everything is going to be okay, I just have to think things are better? Well, it's nice to think things are good, but if that good thinking causes you to not do anything, it can actually be a detriment to you. Whereas if you're like, things are bad, things are terrible, and you kind of like will draw on that, then that could actually motivate you to make changes in your life, like necessary changes to improve your situation. And so I think in that kind of case, it can actually be more helpful, because if you it's almost like you're hitting rock bottom in a way. Like if you're focusing on how bad things are, then I think you're more inclined to make a change in your life. And so from that regard, there are of course extremes. You could be someone who's so pessimistic that you just don't do anything and you just kind of wallow in your sorrow, and that of course does happen to some people. But I think that in most cases where there would be kind of like a conflict between the two, whether it's reacting to a negative situation with optimism or pessimism, I think pessimism could actually be the more useful of the two. And so that was kind of like my thought on that, is that if you have like a thing where you're in a bad situation that needs to change, like you need that motivation to change, and I think that pessimism might actually give that to someone more than optimism would. And I think with optimism, like if you just kind of take, things are going to get better, you could end up in a situation that I like to call the curse of just good enough. And so what the curse of just good enough means is that you're in a situation where it's not really like great, it's not like a situation that you really like, but it's not a bad situation. It's not like a situation where like, oh man, I really need to make some changes in my life. It's more like you kind of like would like things to be better, but so it's just good enough that you don't really you're not inclined to make any changes in your life, but you're I don't know if I can turn right on red here or not at this light, but so you're not, it's just good enough to where you're not inclined to make any changes, but it's not like the life that you want. So I think that's kind of what I call like the curse of just good enough. And I think that actually can be a worse situation than like a really bad situation, because if you're in a bad situation, you're going to be more inclined to change that situation, whereas if you're in just kind of like just like a mediocre situation, you might want it to change. You might think, things could be a lot better, but you may not be, you may not have the motivation to change it because it's just good enough to where you don't really feel an urge to like put in the effort to change it. And so I think in situations like in the case of just good enough, if you are optimistic and you're like, things will get better, things will be fine, it's like, well, it's nice to say that, but if you're not doing anything to make things better, then things aren't really going to get better. Positive thinking can have an effect on your actions, and it could lead to positive actions, but positive thinking alone is not going to get you anywhere. So the positive thinking has to be backed up with the positive actions. And I think whereas if you're pessimistic, then you could be you're going to be more inclined to have that you'll be more inclined to have that motivation to change, because then you'll be thinking, oh, you know, things aren't good, you know, this is bad, I need to make a change. And so, you know, you're going to be more inclined to make that change than if you had that kind of that positive, oh, you know, things will be fine, things will be all right, it's going to be okay. You know, I just kind of have to wait for it. And, you know, sometimes just waiting for it isn't going to really work. And so, what's up, kids? And so you have to, sometimes you have to actually make a change. Like, you actually have to put some work in to make your life better. You know, you can't always just rely on, I think this might be a dead end here. You can't really just rely on things to get better for your life. So, so I think definitely in a case like that, you know, in one of those, what I like to call the curse of just good enough, I think in those kind of situations, pessimism could actually be more beneficial than optimism. So that's kind of like my thought on that. And, you know, I know it's probably not the most easily acceptable premise, because a lot of times people don't want to think, oh, you know, pessimism can be useful, but I think sometimes it can, you know, as long as you don't let the pessimism override you to the point where, you know, you start thinking, you know, where it gets like too bad, we're just like, oh, you know, I can't do anything about this, because then, yeah, you're not gonna do anything to make it better. So in that case, yeah, it can be bad. But if you like get to the point where like you think it's bad, but it's not like too bad where you can't do anything, then like you actually will make some changes in your life and can do some good. So yep, that's my little Dudecool short on optimism versus pessimism. Wait, which road do I want to go on? Oh, I want to go to the left here. So remember, folks, ease up on the throttle and hold on to the bottle, but don't drink and ride. Alright, I think you're supposed to go, and then I'm supposed to go.